So you just made a game that struck gold again. Good job. Now you've not only proved your first game wasn't a fluke, but that you know exactly what you're doing. Now you're in the spotlight and millions of fans are waiting on your next move. Although making a whole new game with an updated engine and cleaner mechanics will take a long time and your momentum won't last forever. What do you do? In the games industry, it's a very common practice to take the final build of the game you just made and make a spin-off, smaller sequel, or even a full sequel within the same framework, make a couple of changes here and there, and release another game within a short time span. This business strategy is seen as a win-win-win by publishers and investors. Publishers can sell a product they know does well in the market at a low cost since a lot of the engine work, textures, mechanics, and balancing are already done. Developers can test out new ideas and mechanics they couldn't try out through DLC, don't have to go through the trouble of creating a project from scratch, and can potentially put a smaller studio on the map since these projects are generally handed over to them. Consumers also win since they get another installment in a series they enjoy to hold them over and keep up the hype for the true sequel to come out. Some of which I'm still waiting on, 16 years later. Valve, you gotta stop gooning me, man. Now, obviously there can be potential downsides to this. With such a short development window, the scope of the project has to be adjusted along with it. This can make these games feel rushed, not fleshed out, and sometimes buggy. If these issues are significant enough, they can make the game seem like a quick cash grab, dragging the series' reputation along with it. The previous game can end up feeling cheapened by this, and the hit to the series' reputation can hurt future installments. You could say that this is an issue with any development cycle, and you'd be right, but the strings attached to a lower budget and higher expectations attached to the specific type of project make the risk of this happening much more common. Shortly after the release and reception of Borderlands 2, publisher 2K Games decided to follow this strategy, since Gearbox didn't have an idea of what they wanted Borderlands 3 to be, and the momentum of the series needed to be followed up on. Homie, those yachts don't buy themselves. Now shut the fuck up and make me my parody of the corporate class. Development of the game was handed off to 2K Australia, with Gearbox providing consultation, resources, and whatever you would consider Anthony Birch. Don't worry, we'll get back to him. In April 2014, the pre-sequel was announced. An omnidirectional mid-air movement was a gimmick that was in at the time. The game took place on Pandora's moon Elpis, so now you could loot and shoot in low gravity, with Oz kits to let you breathe on the moon, and do ground slams that deal elemental or explosive damage. You now have cryo weapons to freeze enemies and make them susceptible to melee, critical, and explosive damage while dealing damage over time. If this sounds broken, that's because it was. It was very broken. Laser weapons were also added, which were always elemental with beam, shotgun, and railgun variants. Slag is also gone, like it should be. The idea behind this game was to tell the story of how Handsome Jack became the villain you fight against in Borderlands 2. All of these were selling points in the next game in the Borderlands series. One thing you'd start to notice at this point though, is that these trailers seemed a bit off. When you watch them, you start to see that the trailers felt like this game was being marketed as a comedy rather than a serious game. Which is kind of weird since this is supposedly about a man that went from a hero and got corrupted into an intergalactic fascist psychopath. In October 2014, the pre-sequel was released and was good. Pretty good actually. One would even say great, but something still felt off. While the reviews of Borderlands 2 were glowing, the pre-sequels were more mixed. Why did we feel so unimpressed with the pre-sequel? Was it the design? Was it wokeness? Was it Randy Pitchford's gooning addiction? Well, let's find out. The main goal of the game was to bridge the events of the first Borderlands and Borderlands 2, hence the name. Haha, epic and hilarious. I love Reddit. The main issues that I have with this game fall into a few categories. The writing, the downgrades in the quality of life, the self-indulgent writing, the pacing, the writing that insults your intelligence, Australians, and did I mention the writing? God, I fucking hate Anthony Birch's writing. If you thought the writing in Borderlands 2 was obnoxious, Anthony Birch was about to show you what was up. My bad. Lay me going to have Derpina hold my beer as I go to be epic trollface very wow. Skibbity toilet. Sorry, had to break the cringe with some real humor. You might think I'm joking, but they unironically included this in one of their trailers.
Skin customizations, vehicle customizations, internet memes. Just kidding. We deleted the out of all those internet memes. Those were awful. Our bad. Wow, such memes very regret.
So, All that's left is the question of how. How is it that there is such a huge disparity in how the two games that are incredibly similar to each other gameplay-wise were received by the public? Let's start with the introduction to each game. Now, it might sound like a dumb question, but what's the goal of an introduction to a game? While games do exist that drop the player straight into things, generally, people tend to like context. Where am I? What am I doing? And why should I care? Your who, what, when, where, and hows. Specifically with Borderlands, the who is the most important part here to the gameplay. You want to show off the Vault Hunter's abilities and personalities in the best light possible so the player can choose which playstyle they're going with the entire game. In Borderlands 1, the looter-shooter genre wasn't really a thing yet. So, the intro put the focus on establishing the world, tone, goals, and the playstyles of the characters solely based off of their designs. Ain't No Rest for the Wicked by Cage the Elephant was the perfect track to put over the intro to show that this wasn't going to be the kind of game where you're playing a selfless hero, but a treasure hunter venturing into a dangerous planet mostly out for themselves and doing good things if they align with their self-interest. Since Borderlands was a new series, the intro had to show off what Borderlands was, set itself apart from other shooters, and make it pretty obvious what the playstyles of the characters were. Gearbox made it pretty obvious that you had the warrior/fighter class, the mage class, the barbarian/tank class, and the ranger/sniper class, and used those video game tropes to their advantage. Borderlands 2 had a bit more freedom in its intro since it was already a successful franchise and didn't have to sell what it was to the player as much. The intro put the focus on showing off the new environments, what changed after the events of the first game, the new threat in town, and who was what character, rather than what the characters were. What I mean by that is instead of establishing what the soldier, siren, berserker, and hunter classes were, it was now about who the soldier, siren, berserker, and hunter classes were when you watch the intro, now that you're pretty familiar with what those are. Although, even if you're not, they still do a good job at showing off each character's abilities. Shortchange Hero by the Heavy continued the theme of Pandora not being a planet that heroes go to, but they've got you, and hey, close enough, I guess. There's a rule in the series that it sticks to for the characters you play, and more of the introduction can be spent on the world. The problem is that pre-sequel breaks some rules and doesn't take that into account. You have 4 new characters that don't really neatly fit into the tropes that the series has set up. The intro starts with Lilith interrogating Athena about why she helped Handsome Jack rise to power. You find out that she was looking for work and found herself in the employ of a Hyperion programmer. The intro starts with bandits infiltrating the rocket that somehow has an airtight entrance door that can just be opened, I guess. It's fine. They have to have the characters fight in the intro, so whatever. The problem is that they just do such a bad job at showing what half the cast even does. With Claptrap and Athena, you get a pretty good idea, but they don't really cleanly fit into one class or the other. Claptrap just has random effects for his action skill, and Athena has her shield that protects from bullets and reflects the damage back to enemies when she throws it. With the way they introduced Wilhelm and Nisha, you'd have some idea of how they'd play based on their character designs, but very little idea of what they actually do for their action skill. And don't tell me Nisha shoots multiple dudes and Wilhelm has his drones for like 1 frame. They just kind of assume you watch the trailers before you play the game. It doesn't feel like they put a whole lot of effort into making the intro, and that it was something that was on a checklist rather than a sequence to inform the player about the game. It's not like you'd have no idea what was going on and what the general playstyles were, just that they put the bare minimum in because they just need the intro. Yeah, sure, put Black Dragon as a song for the intro, even though it doesn't make sense and isn't in line with the themes of the series. I don't care. Where's my fucking yacht? The point of Borderlands is that you're no hero, but you are when compared to dipshits, and sometimes that's good enough. The game follows Borderlands 2 in having 4 main Vault Hunters and another 2 that can be purchased as DLC. I already went over Athena and Claptrap, but as a brief overview of the others, you have Wilhelm, who has a drone that attacks enemies and a drone that heals him, while his skill trees make him less man and more machine. And Nisha, who basically has aimbot as her action skill. The 2 DLC Vault Hunters are Aurelia and the Handsome Jack clone. Aurelia throws a shard of ice that moves from enemy to enemy and has a very siren-like playstyle. And the Handsome Jack clone throws out holograms programs to confuse the enemy, fight and die for him, and work off of his other abilities. What's funny is that even though this character is a body double of Handsome Jack, he really is one of the more interesting and developed characters of the series, but we'll get to that in later videos. The intro sequence is pretty generic and bland, so I'm not really going to spend more time on it. You don't really get any feeling of hype establishing what the game is going to be about like the first two games did, and it just sort of feels kind of empty. So the story starts with you entering the Hyperion Helios satellite for a job that Jack hired you for, but it ends up getting invaded by the Lost Legion. Now, you might be wondering why I'm not telling you who they are. That's because the game doesn't tell you either. All you know is that they're abandoned doll soldiers corrupted by the Vault. What are their goals or motivations? Yes. You're introduced to Tacitor and his antagonistic professional relationship with Jack. After a boss fight,
so I'm here at the bar, and this guy comes up to me, and he's like, oh, because I was wearing this sash that said birthday queen, right? And this guy, he was like, oh yeah, it's your birthday. I was like, yeah, you know, well, it was technically on my birthday like a week ago, but like my friends had COVID, so you know, I was like, so what we decided to do was we all kind of went out tonight and we're celebrating both our birthdays. And he's like, oh yeah, that's like really cool. And I was like, yeah, you know, he's like, how old is she? I was like, oh yeah, she's like 28 or 25 or whatever. And then I was like, yeah, I'm 28. Like I make jokes with my friends that like I'm old, but you know, like older people like tell me to fuck off. And he's like, oh, ha. I was like, yeah, you know, like I make jokes that like I'm a grandpa or whatever. And he's like, oh, haha. And I was like, yeah, you know, my grandparents are dead though. And then like everybody at the bar is just silent. It's like, oh man, what did I say?
Jack ends up staying behind so that you can escape, establishing him right away as someone who used to put others before himself at one point. But then, you see the writing in this game start to rear its head. Immediately after showing you Jack doing this, Anthony Birch thinks you're an idiot and has Brick say the goal of the game out loud in case you just didn't get it. Wow, thanks man. Anyway, you arrive on Elpis and meet Janie Springs, who is a lesbian, who Anthony Birch uses to preach his political views. That's her entire character. Now, I'm not going to go on an anti-woke rant or anything like that, and it might have been partly due to me playing as Athena, but this character could not go 2 seconds without mentioning it. Okay, I can't delay this any longer. It's time to talk about the writing. If you've watched previous videos of mine, you'd know that I'm generally not a fan of the anti-woke movement, because it's mostly just become the other side of the coin that it criticizes now. It's more productive for all parties involved to just look at what is bad writing and what is good writing. It's just as stupid to look at a game and say that a character is good solely based on a certain identity, just as it's stupid to say that a character is bad solely because they're that certain identity. It's annoying to watch the internet explode, either raging or sewing out that Assassin's Creed has a black samurai before the game has even fucking come out, and we don't have any idea how they fit into the world or the story. It's fine to have a degree of excitement or skepticism based on what's come out to the public, but it's really weird to have schizo arguments on the internet based on a less than 4-minute trailer. I could just condense this into just be a normal person and have reasonable opinions when you don't have all the information yet, but this is the internet. As soon as you put out an opinion that kind of sort of sounds one way or the other, people will immediately jump down your throat thinking you are either Mustache Man or other Mustache Man. I even had people calling me a hack for not liking The Last of Us 2. So here I am, making a minute-long disclaimer that I shouldn't have to make. But schizos run the internet, nuance is dead, and it is what it is. Disclaimer out of the way, the writing in this game is so self-indulgent and condescending. What I mean by that is the social views expressed in this game are made solely for people who agree with Anthony Birch. And the writing doesn't do any of the work to challenge the beliefs of people who don't and settle for calling them stupid instead. While I don't disagree with being mean to people who are too far gone, I think the majority of people are not in that camp. Just like the majority of people are not ultra-progressive SJWs in open relationships like Anthony Birch is. I'm not trying to dunk on him for this. You do you and live your life in the way that makes you happiest as long as you're not hurting other people. But I think it's good to acknowledge when you're writing a story, whether you're putting beliefs into your game that the majority of people will either agree or disagree with, so that you can put a certain amount of work into making that argument in your story accordingly. You have to convince people of things. Let's take Arcane for example, because God, I love to glaze this show. In the United States, there's a significant portion of people who think the government has a role in addressing systemic inequality and the divide between the rich and the poor, and those who do not. Arcane makes the argument that it should by showing you the effects of not addressing inequality. Poverty, crime, rampant drug use, mental illness, corruption, civil unrest, and authoritarian responses to that civil unrest supported by a scared citizenry. The writers put in the work to show that people working together, fighting for equality, and embracing self-sacrifice for the benefit of others are what create a better world. Not being apathetic to the struggles of others, chasing vengeance, forcing your ideology on other people, or paying any cost for power. Every element of the story and character interaction furthered this message, and you can tell from the beauty of the writing, characters, and setting that they cared about what they were saying. Now, compare this to the pre-sequels writing. There's a constant undertone of LOL, isn't this funny, my fellow woke boys? Why should we bother saying why we're right? Put effort into the story or reinforce our message? Or accurately represent the struggles of the disenfranchised? That sounds like a lot of work. I'm not saying that a comedy game has to be insanely deep and thought-provoking, but if you're going to put social commentary into your game that your audience might not agree with, put in some effort to match that. They didn't have this problem in Borderlands 2, or at least not as much. Ellie was written as a good representation of body acceptance. She has a positive self-image of herself, was funny, witty, and didn't want to lose weight just to appease other people, but took responsibility for her own life choices and the consequences that stemmed from them. In his blog posts, you can tell Anthony Birch understood this with the choice of making Axton bisexual coming from a coding error, where his
Wow, do you work out or?
voice line when he revived Maya was played when he picked up anyone, and the writers just went with it and made him bisexual. It's cool because he was a badass soldier who just happened to swing both ways. Like how people who are LGBT in the real world have real hobbies, interests, and personalities beyond them being queer. Back to Janie Springs. She makes this her entire personality and is one of the more insufferable characters in the game. All of her lines, and lines related to her, feel preachy, surface level, and, well, cringe.
Why are we killing Deadlift again?
He's kind of a dick.
Is there anything else, or...?
Well, he also stole my Moonzoomy Digistruct key, stranded me out here, and got really rude when I told him I wasn't into guys, but mainly the being a dick thing.
Wow. That was a really funny joke, my guy. I 100% LOL laughed out loud. God, I love Bad Luck Brian.
And to charge Anthony Birch by extension with the crime of being cringe, I submit to you Exhibit A from a deleted blog post of his. Yes, that would be great, but one must not forget that one shouldn't just throw in minorities for no reason. Doctor Who, Borderlands, James Bond, whatever, comes off phony when they arbitrarily start throwing minorities around just to show how progressive they are. It feels condescending and arbitrary. I'd like to make an argument to the counter-argument. So what? I've been told once or twice that the bisexual or gay characters I wrote for Borderlands 2 were arbitrary and forced. This is 100% true. I did not have any particular stories to tell about human sexuality. I just randomly chose a few characters and decided that they weren't heterosexual. I had no reason to do so other than the belief that a cast of sexually diverse characters is better than a sexually homogenous one. Did it hurt the story? Maybe. Maybe it feels arbitrary that certain female characters mention their wives, or that certain male characters just happen to have several occasions to mention their boyfriends. I'd like to think that I knew this might have been a problem when I wrote the characters in the first place, that by making the cast more diverse and drawing attention to it, I'd be making the story worse. On the upside though, and this is going to sound tremendously arrogant, but stick with me for a few more paragraphs. While arbitrarily diverse casts might make the story worse, they make the real world better. Not the in-fiction world either. I mean, you know, the world, the actual one you and I are in, real life. Unfortunately, it does not make the real world better. All Cletus married to his cousin the second sees is that you just ruined his favorite video game. I would love to live in a world where being queer was just as normal as anything else, but that's just not the world we live in. The point of art is to put your best foot forward to represent your way of thinking and challenge the assumptions of others. Representation matters. How well a character is established and developed, and how you represent their identity is incredibly important. Part of that representation is actually understanding the struggles that these groups of people go through, which I'm not so sure Anthony Birch does. The queer experience is very much riddled with shame, feeling lost and alone, the fear of self-discovery, and anxiety about showing your true self to others. These experiences are not unique to queer people. In fact, many people experience these things, but they're especially prevalent in the experiences of these communities. Because of this, you can put this journey onto a character, put it in front of an audience that isn't necessarily approving of these kinds of communities, and they walk away with a better understanding of the experiences of the group in question, even if they don't change their underlying beliefs. If you have someone's attention, you need to make your case and make it in the best way possible with the time you have. This clip is probably the best example of Anthony Birch's self-fellatiating writing style.
Oh man! Everybody's enjoying their laser weapons, and I'm just sitting around making things explode! My life sucks!
Oh, it's okay. People like explosions.
You're just saying that! People want lasers, not explosions!
No, I really do like explosions. You're great.
Really? Well, I like you now. Do you want to go out?
Sorry, I'm not into guys.
Friend zone! Yeah. Hey, is Athena telling the story about the light reactor thingy? I'd like to just point out that I was in a dark place back then, and I know that friend zoning is an imaginary and misogynistic way of looking at relationships. You guys know what I mean.
Please go away, Torg.
Fair enough. Wow.
There are a few problems I have with this. First off, cringe. Second off, how actually insensitive and degrading to the struggles of men in finding relationships. It's not a good feeling when you want to pursue a romantic relationship with someone and find out that she doesn't think of you like that and just thinks of you as a friend. It's a real thing, and you just called men misogynists for feeling that way. Likewise, women get stuck in something called the fuck zone, where a man they want to be in a relationship with just calls her whenever he wants sex, but doesn't want to actually pursue a relationship with her. Do women hate men for thinking that's a real thing and not liking how it feels? Whichever answer you have should go both ways. This type of writing doesn't make the world better or bring anyone to your cause. It's needlessly divisive and antagonizes people who might otherwise be willing to hear what you have to say. All this is a contest of who can have the wokest social views rather than actually helping minorities. I'm not saying I'm perfect either. Looking back at my IGN video, there were many better ways that I could have made my argument that didn't antagonize people who disagreed with me. But I learned from that, while there are tons of writers in the industry that still just hand over talking points to dishonest commentators. How much better of a character would Janie Springs be if she was extremely outgoing, but when it came to matters with Athena, she'd be much shyer of a person and subtly drop hints with plausible deniability out of fear of how Athena would react, since she probably encountered hostility in other instances of her asking someone out. You know, character writing that's genuinely understanding of the gay experience and wants to properly represent that group instead of being cynically and performatively written. Speaking of performative, you have one point in the game where Moxie complains about Janie Springs constantly being creepy to her, playing into the homophobic stereotype that lesbians prey on straight women. I fucking hate Anthony Birch's writing. Anyway, stick your yacht out for the Rizzler or something. Welcome back, I knew you were tuning out. Anyway, you go on to fight a guy whose entire character is that he loves jump pads. And no, I really wish I was joking when I said that, even though that joke would probably be on par with the humor of this game.
Get bent, up. I ain't taking orders from the dude who threw me in prison.
They said your jump pads are stupid.
I will annihilate them.
Damn, bro. That was hella funny. Laugh out loud. I love Rage comics.
This game tries way too hard to be funny. But anyway, we'll expand on that later. This fight is actually awful. The entire time, the boss jumps from pad to pad, electrocutes the floor when you get close, and throws shock orbs at you while you're constantly chasing him and trying to get a hit in with early game low accuracy weapons. This fight is so slow paced and such a slog to play through.
Alright, I guess we're doing some side quests. No, I'm banging my head against the wall. We're doing this. We're making this happen. I'm not giving up. All right. We're on the Sigma male grind set. Okay. Did Patrick Bateman give up when I've never seen that movie?
The problem was that Fight for Your Life was balanced for the gameplay of Borderlands 2. With the different movement system and gravity mechanics of the pre-sequel, everything had to be further apart and multi-leveled to make the movement system feel satisfying. However, this made it very easy for you to get downed, an enemy jumps across the map away from you, and there's not dick you can do about it, so you die.
Damn. No, don't do that, man. Oh, ain't no way. Ain't no way. He did it. He did it to me. Oh, come on. Oh, I just got cucked, bro. I just got cucked. I got cucked.
You're sent to Concordia to ask Moxie for help disabling a jamming signal that's preventing Helios's defense system from being used. At this point, you'll start to notice the pacing issues. Everything feels so far apart. The quests have you doing random menial tasks for way longer than you should be, and so many times, the way forward is blocked until characters stop yapping and are done giving you their life story and social security number.
Over here? Over here. Is it over here? Oh, my bad. I didn't realize I have to wait for the dialogue to complete before I can actually, like, advance in the game. My bad. That one's on me, man. I'm sorry.
Sure, Borderlands 2 had some issues with these things, but it's nowhere near the extent of this game. This game wastes so much of your time and wants you to listen to the story like it's the next Last of Us. No, not that one. Once again, these are smaller issues with the gameplay compared to the overall great experience, but they definitely drag the game down. You soon figure out that the Marif, head of Concordia and a previous subordinate of Jack, was responsible for the signal. When Jack confronts the Marif, Jack decides to spare him, and the Marif fires when Jack turns his back, resulting in Jack killing him after he runs out of bullets in the gun and surrenders. This is your first glimpse at Jack committing a morally questionable action, but this is Borderlands, and it's far from the worst thing that one of the quote-unquote good guys has done in the series. At this point, Jack decides to build a robot army to take over Helios, and you have to enlist the help of a guy named Davis Pickle. Cutting-edge comedy here, man. I sure can't wait to meet Fartmaster 69 next. So begins probably the worst mission in all of Borderlands. So this section very excessively uses what I like to call cockblock game design. What this entails is that you have an objective, you go towards that objective, you hit a roadblock, you get roadblocked on the roadblock, and the entire level, rather than revolving around you progressing the game or story, consists of you continuously trying to uncockblock yourself. If you don't believe me, here's the entire level. You try to cross the bridge, he blows up the bridge. You try to use the methane pipe to cross the lava, the methane pipe isn't working. Go to the pumping station, redirect the flow from the pumping station, dump the methane, finally getting you back to where you started. Go into Drakensberg, get blocked by a force field.
Oh, no.
Overload the engine core, get to the force field controls, and finally fight the boss.
Oh, Sam. Sam, I do not like this fucking game when it does this shit to me.
After killing him, you find out his AIGF is actually the military AI you were looking for. During this section, you'll really notice the humor present in this game. You can tell that the writers thought the humor in Borderlands 2 was what made the writing work, but that just wasn't true at all. After I played through this game, I started thinking, what makes a game that doesn't take itself seriously work? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, wait, Borderlands 2 did take itself seriously. The main story of Borderlands 2 was generally serious, with one quip or one-liner here and there, or a joke to add some levity to a serious situation. Like when you find out that the loot you get after Roland dies is actually Marcus's stash and you just robbed him. A lot of the quests that took themselves less seriously were generally relegated to side quests. This game tries way too hard to be funny. A joke is forced into every single moment, and it's just not necessary. The humor in 2 worked because there are a lot of things you did where you'd get 15 minutes into a quest, and the funny moments came from you taking a step back and thinking, wait, what the fuck am I even doing? Hence, this being the one funny joke in pretty much the entire game.
John, I want an update on the Helios situation. Sir, I've got my best people working on a way to...
I want the railgun.
Imperial CEO. Is he as much of a bottle and glass arse as I hear?
Always happy to.
Who the hell is that? That is the 10-year-old boy we hired to help us. You're fired, John.
The reason this is funny is because you have Jack, who's an overconfident programmer, putting you into a far-fetched plan to take back Helios, which is actually starting to all come together now. But with the way he explains it to Tacitor, it makes you take that step back and realize how ridiculous the whole situation is. The joke plays into Jack's personality and the conflict between him and Tacitor. Most of the other jokes are just haha memes, haha that's what she said, haha loud and obnoxious character, or haha isn't it funny that this character is named this funny thing? I fucking hate Anthony Birch's writing. You're tasked next with going to the robot production plant to install the AI who now named herself Felicity. You meet Gladstone, who helps you build a constructor to install Felicity into. Over time, you see that Felicity very much dislikes violence and wants you to make a copy of her since she finds the idea of being put in a constructor terrifying. Jack tells her that there's not enough time before the Lost Legion destroys Elpis and reluctantly orders the installation of Felicity into the constructor. She attacks you, so you fight to disable her and remove her personality for the greater good. Now, this is next in line for morally questionable actions that Jack takes, but it's still arguably pretty justified on an ethical level. Now that you have your robot army, you're tasked with retaking Helios. You get into Jack's office and have to rescue the researchers to shut down the shields to take control of Helios's defenses. Gladstone floats some ideas to why the Lost Legion still has control of them, one of those being a possible mole.
Dude, it's so great, like, how many arguments you can win on the internet, if you just use the nerd emoji with, like, the finger pointing up. It's just great. Some guy says some stupid shit, or, like, corrects you or whatever. You send that nerd emoji, you just win the argument instantly.
When you return to Jack's office, he releases the airlock and kills all the researchers since one of them could be the traitor. This is a way giant leap morally for Jack being forced to wipe the personality of an AI or killing somebody in questionable self-defense. All of a sudden, he's just evil now. Man, wouldn't it be a cool story idea to watch Jack's slow moral decay as he makes choices that gradually erode his humanity until he becomes the villain you fight in Borderlands 2? Wouldn't it be interesting to have quests that you win on where you felt justified in every action you took until you reached a point where you suddenly looked back and realized, wait, I'm the bad guy. Yeah, me neither. Where's my fucking yacht? In the next section, Moxie helps you shut down Helios' laser until you eventually face off against Zarpedon in the most anticlimactic boss fight. You get a cryptic warning before Jack executes her. You find out that the Eye of Helios' power comes from the Eye of the Destroyer from the Borderlands 1 vault. Moxie tells you to activate all slag injectors, but Jack decides that you should be far away from it before you shut it down. Turns out his judgment was right. A singularity activates, and Moxie just tried to kill you. Jack has a mental breakdown after this and vows to go after the vault. The good. This section was probably my favorite part of the game. It has a diverse amount of enemies that you face, and has a lot of cool moments where Jack talks about his ideas for the enemies that you eventually face in Borderlands 2, along with some of the items you see him use in the game. The bad. What a terrible villain. So, what's the ideal objective of a villain? The ideal villain in a story holds up a mirror to the protagonist, challenging them in unique ways that no other character in the story can. Whether it be fundamental moral beliefs, abilities that only this character has, or through some shared history with the protagonist, you want the villain to be a complex and unique threat that the hero of the story must overcome some core aspect of themselves in order to win. You have no characterization for Zarpedon other than, bro, trust me man, like, you can't open the vault, dude. I'm destroying this moon for the greater good, my guy. I saw the future. The game makes sure to say it multiple times out loud in case you were too stupid to get it. The ideal scenario for a villain in this game is to challenge Jack morally until he reaches the point where he needs to cast away those morals to win, becoming Handsome Jack in the process. There's no way Zarpedon directly challenges Jack. Jack's moral corruption feels rushed and forced, and Zarpedon has hardly any characterization at all. Wouldn't it be cool if Zarpedon was an ex-mercenary who did horrible things in the name of Dahl, encountered the vault, saw the future, and decided she would seek redemption by stopping Jack? Throughout the game, she could engage in the unethical and dishonorable tactics she used as a mercenary. Jack would slowly need to become more and more depraved in his actions until the character he started as is unrecognizable in order to win. In trying to save the world, Zarpedon would doom it to Handsome Jack. In trying to do the right thing, Handsome Jack would end up becoming the villain you would see in Borderlands 2, a moral defeat for both characters. But the writers just kind of decided to end up skipping all of the build-up to there. Thanks, Anthony Birch. What's he working on now anyway?
No.
Anyway, you go on to look for the vault as Jack becomes more and more unhinged in wanting to find it, asking you to kill an unarmed soldier and to destroy the Legion ship even though your character tells him that he could just rush to the vault. Man, remember how all flying enemies that are constantly moving around are always the worst enemy in every single Borderlands game? How about a boss like that? He's constantly flying around and being annoyingly hard to hit and high in the sky. In the bunker fight in Borderlands 2, it at least stopped every once in a while so that you could get some damage in. Not here. Keep using those jump pads and chasing around the map, pal. You eventually make your way to the vault, and the last area looks pretty sick. The final fight is fine. It's a pretty fun fight, but doesn't involve nearly as much strategy as the warrior from Borderlands 2. One thing that's unforgivable, though, is that the game makes you watch every single time as he emerges from the ground if you die in the fight. And they still have you watch the 500-second respawn animation too. Why? Why? After the final battle, the vault gives Jack a vision of the future, showing him the warrior. Lilith punches the relic into Jack's face, trying to stop this, now bridging the gap between Borderlands 1 and 2. To call Borderlands a pre-sequel a cash grab is not entirely accurate. Somewhat, but not entirely, as many jokes as I've made in the video about it. You can tell this is a very well-crafted game made by people who cared, but you can't deny the impact that the success of the previous games had on it. A smaller budget, Anthony Birch's overconfidence off of the success of 2, heightened expectations from fans, a short development window, and the studio not having the clout that Gearbox did to push against the more unsavory ideas from executives resulted in something great, but not groundbreaking, which was the expectation for the series at this point. The reason why the pre-sequel represents the start of the downward spiral of the series is that the cracks from Borderlands 2 began to be filled in the worst way possible. There's a quote from John Carmack, co-founder of id Software, who said, "Story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important." I think this captures a common sentiment in the video game community. However, I'd say that this sentiment is mistaken about the idea of what video games are and what they can be. Why is it that we don't remember games like Final Fantasy VII, The Last of Us, or Silent Hill mostly for their gameplay, but the story that they tell? Sure, you need to have good gameplay for a good video game, but the best and most memorable games manage to blend their story and gameplay seamlessly. There's a reason that the pre-sequel was made, and Handsome Jack is a recurring character in multiple titles past this one, even though he's dead. People love to hate Handsome Jack because he's a great villain. Video games absolutely benefit from good writing, and the entire experience is that much more memorable for it. The problem with the pre-sequel was that it was a game that had a lot of cynicism behind it. The executives wanted money, Anthony Birch wanted to shoehorn in his beliefs without regard how it would affect the story, and fans wanted more Borderlands. This resulted in lazy, uninspired writing that had a goal in mind and didn't care how it got there. The characters were shallow, the jokes were forced, the memes were bad, and the story was rushed. All of the writing that made you genuinely care about what you were doing in Borderlands 2 was gone, replaced with what they thought Borderlands was. Instead of being a passion project poking fun at the greed of corporations that basically made executives at 2K be forced to make fun of themselves for profit, this is where the executives took that power back. Now, instead of being anything substantive, Borderlands became a parody of itself, an empty vessel for Anthony Birch's activism and corporate greed, neither of which cared what was at the core of Borderlands. I'm not trying to imply anybody involved is a horrible human or anything. It's just disappointing to see the quality of writing go from Borderlands 2 to this. And I wish I could say it got better.